Happy New Year! I'm Dylan.
I'm Ryan.
And since it is officially 2025, it is time once again for us to look back on the past year and give you our top 5 books that we read in 2024. Not necessarily new releases, just all the stuff we read that year. And you go first with your number 5.
Yeah, I'll start out with my number 5. A little bit of a preview for this upcoming season of Adaptation Station. My number 5 was Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King.
Interesting. Yeah. Stay tuned for an episode on that. Well, my number 5 is a book called Desire Museum by Danielle Cadena de Ulin. That was a new poetry release that came out in 2024 that I read that I really enjoyed.
Cool. My number 4 is Sweet Thursday by John Steinbeck. That is the sequel to Cannery Row.
Yes.
And I liked it better than Cannery Row.
Okay, interesting. I need to check that one out. Steinbeck made my top 5 last year. My number 4 is Hidden History of Burma, Race, Capitalism, and the Crisis of Democracy in the 21st Century by Tien Myint Oo. That is a nonfiction history / current events type book that I really liked.
Cool. My number 3 is a book called Damned by Chuck Palahniuk. Chuck Palahniuk. Get ready for that kind of existentialism, kind of bleak sarcasticness of that. It was great.
Yeah, his books are pretty out there like that. Cool. My number 3 is The Poetry of Impermanence, Mindfulness, and Joy, which is a collection of poetry by a lot of different poets, edited by John Brehm, a contemporary poet that I really liked. So another poetry one made my top reads this year.
Cool. My number 2 is a nonfiction book. Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies by Jared Diamond, which gives a description of, how societies developed the technologies and things like they had from a perspective of where they came from and the layout of the continents and weather patterns and human evolution. It's a pretty interesting view on it.
I've seen that one on the shelf. It's a really big book, right?
I had it on Kindle, so for me it was very small.
Yeah.
But it was pretty long.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. Well, my number 2 is called California Between the Fires by Ryan Kenneth Allen. Yes, your new collection of poetry that came out in 2024. It was one of my favorites, almost number 1. I was reading a lot of poetry this year.
Yeah, this is your third poetry in your top 5? Or?
It is, yeah, my third poetry, and I was up in Northern California when the park fire started happening in summer of 2024 is when I was reading your newest collection of books, so it really just hit home for me. I loved it.
Good. Yeah, that's a cool callback. I think I had your book of poetry on the very first top 5 that we did. So.
Yep. So what's your number 1?
My number 1 is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway.
Okay, very cool.
That's a pretty thick book, but I obviously thoroughly enjoyed it.
I need to read that one too. I'm getting some good recommendations from you, and my number 1, like one of yours, is a preview for our upcoming season of Adaptation Station, because my number 1 favorite read from 2024 was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Stay tuned for season 4 because we're doing another Cormac McCarthy and Stephen King.
Yeah.
Okay, so those were our top 5 favorite things we read in 2024. But before we go, we'd like to give some honorable mentions.
Yeah, I have an honorable mention, and mine is a book called A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay, an author that we had on last season of Adaptation Station for Cabin at the End of the World. I really liked that one. It made my top 5 from last year. This one just barely didn't make my top 5, but I'm really enjoying Paul Tremblay. as I've newly discovered author for me.
Yeah, great author recommendation there. Yeah. My honorable mention is On the Duty of Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. That might have made my top 5 even higher, but I wasn't sure if I should include that as a book because it's technically an essay, but it's published on its own as a book, and I read it just as a standalone in 2024. And it's fantastic. Great essay.
Yeah, Thoreau is good. I like Thoreau. I haven't read a whole lot of Thoreau, but like Walden, I loved it when I read it in high school. So
that one's longer. So if you haven't you haven't read Thoreau before, you could start with Civil Disobedience because it's a shorter essay. If you're interested in history, because it's written before the Civil War, but during the Mexican-American War, and he was protesting that war and slavery, and went to jail for not paying his taxes for those reasons. But yeah, very interesting read. Okay, so those were some of our favorite books we read in 2024. What was your favorite book you read in 2024? Comment it down below.
If you need something to read,
we have some books of our own.
books available. One of our books was his top in his top 5.
Yeah, so, I really loved.
One of his was in my top 5 from a few years ago.
Yeah, I loved Ryan's latest collection of poetry, but he has 2 more before that. I have a collection of poetry and a novel. You can find those down in the description. And thanks for watching, as always. Bye.